When my neighbor tried to steal my house, she never expected this. When your neighbor tries to steal your home, you think it can't get worse. But what if I told you that she wasn't just trying to take it, she was willing to ruin us financially and turn the whole neighborhood against us? This is the story of how karma caught up with her in ways she never expected. It started with a dream house by the lake, the place where we imagined building a family, making memories, and living peacefully. But all of that came crashing down when our neighbor Anne decided that she wanted the house for herself. What followed was a nightmare of harassment, manipulation, and legal battles, until the day karma delivered a blow so hard it left her scrambling for answers. From the moment we signed the papers for the house, Anne's presence was felt. She had an air of entitlement that made my skin crawl. At first, we didn't think much of her claims. Who could really believe a neighbor when they told you that your new home actually belonged to them? It was absurd. But the more she insisted, the more unnerving it became. Every time we stepped outside, there she was, standing on her porch with her arms crossed, glaring at us as if we had trespassed on her personal territory. Then, the confrontation started. One day, I was working on our front yard, trying to fix the overgrown hedges that had been left unattended for months, when Anne marched over, her face twisted in anger. "What do you think you're doing?" she snapped. I looked up, confused. "I'm trimming the hedges. Why?" "Those are my hedges," she said, her voice rising. "You're trespassing. I don't care what your deed says. This land belongs to me, and you have no right to touch it." I stared at her, dumbfounded. The hedges were clearly on our side of the property line. I had already checked the surveyor's report and verified the boundaries with the county. But Anne didn't care about facts. She only cared about what she thought was hers. I tried to reason with her. "Anne, we've been through this. The property lines are clear. We bought this house legally, and we're not trying to take anything that doesn't belong to us. We just want to live in peace." But Anne wasn't interested in peace. She was interested in control. "You'll regret this," she spat before turning on her heel and storming back to her house. It was in that moment that I realized this was only the beginning. Anne wasn't going to stop until she got what she wanted, and we were about to be dragged into a battle that we hadn't signed up for. The harassment didn't stop there. Anne started spreading rumors about us around the neighborhood. She told anyone who would listen that we had stolen her family's home, that we were squatters who had no legal right to be there, and people believed her. Slowly but surely, we became the outcasts of the neighborhood. The friendly waves from neighbors stopped. Conversations that used to flow freely now ended abruptly when we approached. It felt like we were being watched, judged, and blamed for something we hadn't done. We had hoped to make friends in this new community, but instead, we found ourselves isolated. And then there were the property disputes. Anne would walk the perimeter of our yard every morning, sometimes even measuring the distance between our house and hers with a tape measure, claiming that parts of our home encroached on her land. She filed multiple complaints with the city, accusing us of building structures too close to the property line, even though the house had been there for decades. We were forced to attend meetings with city officials to defend ourselves, wasting time and money to prove that we weren't violating any regulations. Every complaint Anne made was dismissed, but that didn't stop her. In fact, it only seemed to fuel her desire to make our lives miserable. The breaking point came when Anne decided to escalate things even further. One evening, after a long day of work, I came home to find a construction crew on our property. They were tearing down our fence, the one we had just paid to have installed, without our permission. I rushed over to stop them, demanding to know what was going on. Anne appeared from behind one of the workers, a smug look on her face. "I'm reclaiming my land," she said. "That fence was built on my property, and I have every right to tear it down." I was furious. "You have no right to do this. This is our land, and we paid for that fence." "Not according to my survey," she shot back. "And I'm not going to let you steal from me any longer." I immediately called the police, and when they arrived, they forced the construction crew to stop. But the damage had already been done. Our fence was destroyed, and we were left with a legal mess to clean up. That night, I sat down with my partner, feeling utterly defeated. How had things gotten so bad? We had done everything right, followed every law, and yet we were being treated like criminals in our own home. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice shaking. "I feel like we're fighting a war we can't win." My partner squeezed my hand, their face full of determination. "We're not giving up. This is our home, and we're not going to let her take it from us." And so, we pressed on. We hired a lawyer and filed a restraining order against Anne, hoping that it would put an end to her harassment. But Anne was relentless. She fought the restraining order in court, claiming that we were the ones harassing her, and that she was simply trying to protect what was rightfully hers. The court battle dragged on for months, draining us financially and emotionally. Anne showed up to every hearing with a new sob story, painting herself as the victim in a situation that she had created. It was exhausting, and there were times when I wondered if we would ever see the end of it. The tipping point came when Anne tried to pull a stunt that could have ruined us for good. In a desperate attempt to regain control, she filed a lawsuit claiming that our house had been built on land that rightfully belonged to her. She argued that the previous owners had encroached on her property when they built the house decades ago, and that we had no legal right to live there. The lawsuit sent shockwaves through our lives. If Anne won, we would lose everything: our home, our investment, and the future we had planned. The stress was unbearable. We spent countless nights poring over legal documents, meeting with our lawyer, and trying to find any loophole we could use to fight back. Our lawyer assured us that Anne's claims were baseless, but the fear of losing everything still loomed over us. We couldn't shake the feeling that we were trapped in a nightmare with no way out. The day of the trial was one of the most nerve-wracking days of my life. We sat in the courtroom, listening as Anne's lawyer presented her case. They claimed that the property lines had been improperly drawn when the house was built, and that the land our house sat on should have been part of Anne's property all along. I felt sick to my stomach as they presented their arguments, terrified that the judge would side with her. But then, it was our turn. Our lawyer presented evidence that the property lines had been properly established, and that Anne's claims were nothing more than a desperate attempt to seize land that didn't belong to her. The judge listened carefully, taking notes as both sides made their case. And then, after what felt like an eternity, the judge finally spoke. "I find the defendant's claims to be without merit," the judge said. "The property in question has been lawfully owned by the plaintiffs, and there is no evidence to suggest otherwise. The case is dismissed." Relief flooded through me. We had won. After months of fighting, we had finally won. But the victory was bittersweet. We had spent so much time, money, and energy defending our home that the joy of winning was overshadowed by the toll it had taken on us. We thought the legal battles were over, but Anne had one last trick up her sleeve. In a final, desperate attempt to hurt us, she spread rumors throughout the neighborhood that we had bribed the judge to rule in our favor. She went door to door, telling anyone who would listen that we had cheated her out of her home and that we were dangerous criminals. At first, we didn't think much of it. We had been through so much already that we didn't have the energy to fight back against her lies. But then, things took a turn for the worse. One day, we received a letter in the mail. It was from the local homeowners association, informing us that they were launching an investigation into our legal dealings. Apparently, Anne had convinced several members of the association that we had engaged in fraudulent activity, and they were taking her accusations seriously. I was furious. We had done nothing wrong, and now we were being investigated as if we were the criminals. It felt like no matter how many times we proved our innocence, Anne found a way to drag us back into the mud. But this time, karma was on our side. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Anne had been lying to everyone. The Homeowners Association uncovered evidence that Anne had falsified documents, tampered with property records, and even attempted to bribe city officials to support her claims. The tables had finally turned. Anne was exposed for the fraud she was, and her reputation in the neighborhood was shattered. People who had once believed her lies now saw her for who she truly was, a manipulative, deceitful woman who had tried to destroy an innocent family. The Homeowners Association issued a public apology to us, acknowledging that we had been wrongfully accused and clearing our name once and for all. And as for Anne, she was hit with a $200,000 fine for her illegal actions, and she was forced to sell her home to cover the costs. The irony was almost too sweet. After everything she had done to try to steal our house, she ended up losing her own. In the end, justice was served. Anne's reign of terror was finally over, and we were able to live in peace. The house that had once been a source of stress and conflict became our sanctuary, a place where we could finally relax and rebuild our lives. The experience had changed us. We were no longer the naive, hopeful couple who had moved into the neighborhood with dreams of making friends and settling down. We had been tested, pushed to our limits, and we had come out the other side stronger than ever. As I look back on everything that happened, I realized that this experience taught me some valuable lessons. It taught me the importance of standing up for what's right, even when the odds are stacked against you. It taught me that people like Anne will always exist. People who think they can take what they want without facing any consequences. But most of all, it taught me that karma has a way of catching up with those who deserve it. Our house is more than just a place to live. It's a symbol of resilience, of perseverance, and of the power of truth. And every time I walk through the front door, I'm reminded of how far we've come and how much we've overcome. Have you ever faced a nightmare neighbor like Anne? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales of karma, justice, and resilience.